Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's 11 o'clock, so inshallah we want to start on time, and so therefore we will end on time as well. So Jazakallah for those people who are joining us. A few more will join us, and there's going to be a few on YouTube as well, because it's linked to our local community YouTube channel, because some people asked for it to be shown on YouTube, and therefore they will be able to see it afterwards as well. So warm welcome to our guest today, who's going to be talking about Islamic wills. Just for the benefit of how we're going to do this, there will be certain questions which you already have, general things, getting into the subject of wills. If anyone has a question, there is a chat facility, so you will be allowed to ask any questions which you like via the chat facility, or at the end, you can ask the questions which are specifically to our speaker today. If there is something very specific you want to talk about your personal details, then obviously I would recommend that you will have the opportunity to take our guest speaker's details and contact them that way with your particular situation. So, warm welcome to everyone on this Sunday morning, and Jazakallah for attending us. So before we get into the subject, let's speak to how did you get into this subject?
Assalamu alaikum. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I got into this subject back in 2006 because there was just the beginning of the awareness for writing Islamic wills, and having had the been in a position where I was writing wills, helping people writing wills through my profession as a bank manager. I realized there was a need for the knowledge and raising the awareness for writing Islamic wills, because we have a separate set of laws that we must fulfill. We have every guidance of every aspect of our life. So this was something that was, I thought, was very important for us as Muslims, since the law of the land does allow you to practice our religion.
Okay, and how have you found it so far in the situation that you're in? How is the general understanding of the general Muslim population?
Alhamdulillah, you know, as time has come on, the realization of and the awareness of following our Islamic principles has not been greater, subhanallah. And I thoroughly enjoy my job, my profession, because I'm helping people prepare for the certainty that is going to come. And I think because of the coronavirus in the last few months, it has raised a lot of awareness, and people have got the desire to make sure that they actually plan for the event should anything happen to them.
Okay. Now, before we start this subject, a lot of people will think of wills being in a very non-Islamic terminology. What's the Islamic ruling about wills?
I will be covering that, inshallah. The ruling is that we know there's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that it's not rightful for a Muslim who has something to bequeath to sleep 2 consecutive nights without having his will written with him. Sayyid, everybody is aware that we are going to die. We need to do something about it, but yet through some neglect, some laziness, some will really to have the will written.
Okay. So from that, let's go back one step. Say, assume that there is no will written. What actually happens when a person dies and there is no will written?
Where there is no will written, it's confusion. Hello?
Yes, please.
Can you hear me? Yeah, there's confusion, there's uncertainty. You just do not know who to turn to. I've seen families where this has happened. And as you know, the friends, relatives, you get advisors coming from all directions saying you should do this, you should do that. You get pulled from one direction to another. The emotions are very different at that time because you've lost somebody who's very near and dear. You just do not have the direction. And if you have young children, who's going to take care of them, what's going to happen to your wealth, what's going to happen to the businesses that you're leaving behind, who will take care of them. It's very, very chaotic. They say that if you want to stop your family from mourning you, leave your affairs in a mess, i.e. die without a will.
Okay.
And it's not going to happen how you may have wanted if you had planned for it. It's going to be in the hands of people who may not know what's the right thing to do. It will cost a lot of money. I know that because the longer it takes, the more time it takes for you to get all the information together. It will cost money. It will cost perhaps a large inheritance tax bill, depending on the size of the estate. And you will forget who you've lost. You will be so buried in the, I'm using the word buried in the paperwork. And you may not deal with the right things in the correct manner. And most of all, you may not be following the Quran and the Sunnah.
Okay. So, you said, you mentioned you may not be following Quran and Sunnah, but let's assume that there is no will, and someone, let's give a scenario, let's assume that someone has an estate worth £1,000,000. So
Sure.
how will, in the absence of a will, how will that normally get split up?
Because you've not written your will, because you have not planned for it, you've not spoken to your families or your near and dear ones, the English law will dictate how your estate is distributed. And that is not fair, and it contradicts with the Islamic law of inheritance. So if you have left a spouse and children, the spouse will get up to a certain extent the value of the property, and the remaining will have to pass to your children and in equal shares. And because a portion of that will be passing to your children, that may be subject to 40% inheritance tax. And that could result in having to make because you have to make the inheritance tax payment 6 months from the date of death. That could mean that you have to sell assets, or you may have to borrow money, you may have to get a loan on interest to pay the HMRC. So it creates a lot of hurt and pain financially as well as emotionally.
Okay, and so you mentioned about pain and whatever else, and they may not be get split, and it gets split according. What is the main difference in order how it would be split normally in the absence of an Islamic will?
How would it be split?
How would it? What is the main differences between an Islamic will and a normal will, or say there is no will and therefore it is split according to the way the government decides that it should be split?
Yeah, in an English with the English law, the 275 pounds would go to the £275,000 would go to the spouse, and the remaining would go to your children, depending on who you have left behind, in equal shares. And if they are minors, less than 18 years old, then the assets would be held in trust for them until they become major, they attain the age of majority. And that could mean anything over £500,000 or 325,000, depending on what assets you have. There could be 40% tax on, say, let's work it out on 500,000 as an example. That's £200,000. And taking £200,000 to pay within 6 months will put a great burden on the family and the finances.
No, absolutely, it will do. Absolutely understandable.
And just to add there, if the house is the main asset and you've got young children, and if you have to make that payment, that large payment, you could find yourself that you are having to sell the property and downsize, just creating added stress for having to sell the property, raise the monies, and relocating it. causes a lot of stress on if you have little children, or even if you've got adult children. Making those decisions is very difficult.
Okay, and Islamically, how would generally things be divided Islamically? Just to give an idea to the audience here today.
Here we are very fortunate to be Muslims, because we know that every aspect of our life we have been given guidance about, from birth to death. So Islamically, we can take guidance from the Quran, and there are 3 verses in Surah Nisa which give us very clear guidance as to how the estate should be distributed. It's not only the Quran, we have to refer to the Sunnah for further guidance. And we are basically, the guidance is that the first of a will forms 4, there are 4 areas which form part of a will. One is, the first is the payment of debts, the funeral expenses. Then it's debts and any other expenses that have to be paid because of dealing with the estate. Then it's the wasiya, the 1/3 up to 1/3 of your estate that you can give to people who are not your fixed share inheritors. And the remaining, whatever after the gifts that and bequests you make, the remaining has to be distributed in accordance with the Quran, which is Quran and the Sunnah, which is to your fixed share inheritors, and it depends who is alive at the time of your death.
Okay.
Can I give an example?
Yes, yeah, please.
Yeah, if for example, you leave on your death, you leave your parents who are alive, mom and dad, you have a wife and your children, then each one will have a share from your estate. So your parents, for example, each one will have 1/6. Your wife would get 1/8, and the remainder will be distributed between your sons and your daughters on the ratio of 2 to 1.
2 to 1, okay. Right. Now you mentioned...
Which is why in an Islamic situation, we don't choose our inheritors. They are chosen by Allah for us.
Okay.
And that's the difference between a normal will, because in a normal will, in English law, we are given testamentary freedom. So we can leave it to anyone. In an English will, you can leave your estate to whoever you wish. It can be your next door neighbor's cat, or a dog, or a donkey's home.
Okay, coming back to that point where you mentioned that our inheritors are chosen, can I then not give a portion of my wealth, or decide in my will to give a portion of it to charity or to someone else, etc., outside my immediate family?
Alhamdulillah, Allah has given us the flexibility and discretion of up to 1/3 of your net estate.
1/3.
So from the 1/3 of your net estate, it is recommended, if you have the means, if you have the wealth, you need to make sure your family are looked after very well financially, so they're not left helpless begging for money. So if you have the means, from the 1/3 of your estate, you should leave to your poor relations, because they have the first hug. If they are all okay, then you can leave it to charity. You can leave it to non-Muslim family. For example, if somebody is a revert and their estate cannot be inherited by the parents, so they have the flexibility and discretion to give from the 1/3. And that is really Islamic law. Islam recommends that we have family unity, so that in order to give them something out of the 1/3. But giving to charity is a very rewardable act. It helps mankind. It is sadaqah jariyah, because you are leaving yourself, after you've gone, a route open for you to earn the rewards of Allah Ta'ala. And you're benefiting mankind. And what is a greater reward than that?
Absolutely, and that's useful. Now, this one third can also be used, I believe that if someone has adopted children, for example, they will not be part of the inheritance, so they will be included in that one third that you need to leave them. Is that right?
Absolutely. You see, it's only your blood relations, your bloodline which inherit from your estate. Adopted children, foster children, stepchildren, it depends, which side they are from. So that one third portion is Allah Ta'ala has given us the discretion to use that one third portion to keep those keep them for the gifts to those members of the family or group of people.
That's clear, right? Now, you said that obviously our inheritors are chosen, but some people may have a family dispute and they wish to exclude someone from the will. Is that permissible or not?
You see, Allah Ta'ala has not said in the Quran, or we don't hear it from the Sunnah, that the inheritance is subject to. For example, if somebody has been disobedient to you, or a son or a daughter has been disobedient, you cannot exclude them from the inheritance, because Allah Ta'ala has not said, He's not commanded that we should base the inheritance on those personal desires and wishes. The only people who should be excluded from the main inheritance are unfortunately those family members or those inheritors who leave the fold of Islam and they are murtad.
So they will not be part of the will at all, yes?
They cannot inherit, because you see, inheritance is like a bloodline in the body. You have to circulate it within the body.
Okay, interesting. Now, looking at the mechanics of how you put a will together, a lot of people feel that what's such involved? Do I have to come to you with a list of all my assets and my wealth? And obviously that will change over time. So how does actually putting a will together actually work?
You see, again, with an Islamic will or with any other will, we do know that assets change over time. You may have something now which is valued at 100,000. You may dispose of it in a few years' time, and you may acquire other wealth, which is why we don't write anything in the will with regard to assets. We don't list them in the will, except for those specific gifts that you wish to make. For example, if you want to give your watch, for example, or a car, or your house to a particular, to make a specific gift, it's only those assets that get written in the will. The rest, I strongly recommend that you keep a list of all your, you see, when I take instructions from clients, I will go through all of the list of their assets and their wealth situation. That's the snapshot, so that we can see practically how this will work. However, it's very important for the executors to make sure that they have that information handy for when the time comes at death, so that they can easily deal with the estate based on what it is. You asked the question about how to go about it. Writing an Islamic will, it seems, it seems very scary for a lot of people to even think about death, let alone write a will. But writing a will, I think once you've put your mindset, once you've put the focus on the fact that you want to make sure that you want to plan for your death and prepare for it, it's always good to have a professional or somebody who has the know-how to be able to help you write a will that actually fulfills the laws of the English law, follows all the rules, as well as the Islamic law, because you are not going to be there when the time comes, and you want to make sure your wishes are clear and they can be easily followed.
You mentioned that the executors of the will, who are these executors, who appoints them, etc.?
Executors have got a very important responsibility and a role to play when you are no longer there. They have the responsibility of making sure that they will fulfill the wishes that are written in the will. because they can't exercise their own discretion over any matter. So you have to choose them very carefully. You should most importantly find and appoint people who have the fear of Allah in their hearts, have they are Islamically inclined, because you see, you're dealing with orphans in some situations, and there's a great responsibility about dealing with orphans, and of course the amana, dealing with the estate. So they should be completely trustworthy. They should be people who are not scared to deal with the paperwork. They can keep the peace. If a dispute arises within the family, they can keep that peace. They're good communicators. They'll need to make sure that they're keeping the family up to date with the steps as you're going along with dealing with the estate. And they should have the patience. But most important, you should consider their age. You should consider their own health situation as well, to make sure that they are fit to deal with your estate. If you can't find anyone who is from your family or friends who are able to take and are willing to take over that responsibility, then the option is to appoint a professional or corporate bodies to deal with your estate. But it's important if you can find somebody as a family member or a relation, because they know the family situation a lot better than somebody else.
And would you then have to tell those people that you have been appointed as my executor in the will, and where is the will actually kept, and how do they know what's in the will, etc.?
It's extremely important when you're allocating somebody a big responsibility like this, when you're no longer going to be there, that they are aware of the fact that you have written a will, and that you've appointed them, if they are the sole executors or they have been appointed jointly with somebody else. I think before even appointing them, you should seek their permission, and it's out of courtesy to make sure that they're aware that they have been appointed to act as the executors. It's also very important to let those people who are close to you and trusted members of the family, your trusted children, maybe a friend or two, to let them know that you've made a will, and tell them where the will is being kept, because the will needs to be ready and accessible when the time comes. And also for some, most of the situations, you see, we put our funeral wishes in the will. And when you have expressed certain wishes, sometimes, people may want to have a certain person at the time of death. You want to make sure that your wishes are fulfilled. So you should have a copy of the will at least handy, for when the family members know that they can refer to it in the event of that situation happening. So it's all about preparing, it's all about planning, because we know that we are going to die. There's no doubt about it.
No, absolutely. And as you are aware, that one of my dear friends passed away earlier this year, and he did tell me that he was going to write a will, and he did ask me to be the executor. So I know the stress that it does cause and the responsibility, because when he passed away, may Allah Ta'ala give him Jannat al-Firdaus. His wife did contact me. She knew that I would know something about the wills, etc., and a few things that he had discussed with me. So it is a responsibility, and it does need to be carefully thought about. And
I know the case you are.
Yes, absolutely. You dealt with it. Absolutely, I know.
I think it was extremely beneficial for the brother to have shared his situation with you, because you were able to guide them with regard to the funeral, and make sure that their body wasn't taken from here to another country.
Family members wanted it to be done, so absolutely correct. Yeah, so there has that benefits to talk about that, to put that right down. Now, you mentioned that you can, in your will, you can have some wishes about who you want, etc. What sort of wishes can you put in the will?
With regard to the funeral?
Yes, with regard to the funeral or arrangements, etc.
I think it is extremely important. Having experienced the coronavirus and the deaths recently, there has been a lot of talk about cremation, and thankfully, uh, it was agreed that the Muslims will only be buried, and that was a big worry for the Muslims. And as during these unusual situations, we know that people who passed because of the coronavirus, some of the people did not get their proper ghusl. They had limited number of people attending the Salatul Janaza, and it was a very traumatic time for many of the families, as they were not even able to say their salams and goodbyes to their beloved ones. But I'll just share an example of a situation that happened with one of my clients just before the lockdown situation. I had done his will for him a few years back, and sadly, he died in early March. And because his son and daughter were caring for him, we didn't realize that it was their intention to cremate their father. Although the father was a Muslim, but the children had sadly left the fold of Islam. So they were no longer practicing Muslims, and they thought the best thing would be to actually cremate their father. And thankfully, because of the will, we had the legal strong situation to be able to say, no, he is going to be buried. So as Muslims, I think it's extremely important for us to state in the will that we wish to be buried in an Islamic way, following the Quran and the Sunnah, and to be buried by Muslims, for our body to be handled by Muslims. Because again, during the coronavirus situation, because our undertakers were so busy with the funerals, that the non-Muslim undertakers were happy to, they were offering to take the bodies of Muslims. So I think it's very important to put your wishes that as a Muslim, you want everything to be handled by a Muslim in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah. You also must be putting in the wish as a wish that in the event of the fact that you die abroad, you wish to be buried wherever you pass away,
Okay.
rather than having to transfer the body from one country to another. Another major point is that if you do not wish your organs to be donated, then you must opt out opt out of the NHS donor register. Otherwise, it is law that they will take your organs out. And also, you want to make sure that your body is not used for medical research if you don't have any family, for example. It's the will, the wishes and the will that will actually be taken note of. Another point is that in case of a sudden death or death without knowing what the cause is, as Muslims, we give a lot of respect and dignity to our dead. So we put in their wills that there should be no post-mortem done on the body, but instead, if the authorities, the coroner can instruct for the MRI scan to be carried out instead of to find out the cause of death. I think these are extremely important points that must be mentioned in the will, because I know from experience that having these written in the will actually speak for you when you're no longer there.
Okay, so how do you ensure that everything that you've written in the will is carried out? Does that become mandatory then?
It is mandatory because it's the legal responsibility for the executor to follow the wishes, because if they do not, then they become personally liable for not doing so. So it goes back to the point that I mentioned earlier. You must choose executors, people who will follow the wishes in the will. Because the beneficiaries, you don't want to give the beneficiaries a reason to contest it if they don't. So it's a big responsibility and an authority that has been given to you by the deceased. But in the wills that we write, we make sure that we state in there as an instruction to the executors that especially in an Islamic distribution situation, that the executors must get a confirmation or a certificate from an Islamic legal expert or a Sharia counsel or a scholar of repute to make sure that before the distribution happens, they have fulfilled all of the wishes Islamically and accordingly.
Okay. Now, can a will be changed then at any time? Say if I write a will now, can it be changed can I change it in my lifetime? And can it then, is there any way that even afterwards it may be contested?
Let's take it one by one. If you want to change your will, I certainly recommend that you review your will every 2 or 3 years or on change of circumstances in any event. I think a will is like a mobile phone. You should have a will always there as a working document. It's an extremely valuable document. You should keep it there. You should be, it should be under the pillow, basically. You should review it to make sure it is up to date, because you just do not know when the call of death is going to come. So review it every 2 or 3 years at least. With an Islamic will, because we don't choose our inheritors, an Islamic will distribution remains valid. It is going to remain valid for all time. The only thing that you may want to change in a will is perhaps executors that you've nominated in the will. You may need to reconsider guardianship for your young children, because there may be guardians who may no longer want to carry out that responsibility, or your children have become adult. Or maybe previously you were not in a position to make any sadaqah jariyah payments, and you are now in a position to make sadaqah jariyah. So that's why you should change your will. Changing a will means, if it is just an address only, you don't need to change a will, because you can just simply write a note and keep it with the will. But if it is changes in the executors, and as I've said, then it's important that you write a new will altogether, because a new will revoke previous wills. And it's also important to note that if somebody who was single when they wrote a will and they get married, then they should rewrite the will. If somebody remarries, for example, a marriage revokes a will. And in the situation that you are going through a divorce, or you have divorced, then again, situations and occasions like these, I think it's very important to have your will changed accordingly.
Okay. Generally, just to can you give some examples for the listeners about when things have gone wrong in the absence of will, or where a will has helped people out, so they get the idea of why a will is so important?
The main thing, you see, wealth is something that changes attitudes. Even if it is a small amount of money, you may think you have a united family and you've got everything is going smoothly. However, when it comes to wealth, if you have not left it, you've not explained to your children that you have written a will and this is how it is, this is what we are commanded by Allah to leave it as such, then people will fight over small items of jewelry. They will fight over anything. And you see, if they are not handled by people who can bring about peace in the family and resolve situations, then the route is the courts. And that is a very expensive, when you try to challenge somebody in the courts, a lot of money passes into the pockets of the solicitors, and it takes years for these disputes to be resolved. So it's something that in order to avoid it, you must write a will, because you don't want to leave a family that is going to be disconnected and disunited afterwards.
And the other thing is, from my point of view as an accountant, I know that having a will, if you do it properly, you can avoid a lot of taxes as well, because there is in the UK inheritance tax. So even when people pass away, does not mean to say there is no tax to be paid. There is going to be tax to be paid. And so a will can help on that. I'm going to open the opportunity out to the viewers. If you've got anyone's got any particular questions, they can either come online and ask the question, or they can use the chat box. I know some of you are on YouTube, and if you want to use the YouTube comments thing, and we'll take the questions from there. I will open it up, and I know that a few of you do have some questions. And I've got one question. Okay. The question that's come through is, someone's texted me this question. If the Islamic share distribution is set in the Quran, why do you need to have a will?
The reason why we need to have a will is because we are not living in an Islamic country where the distribution is going to be happening automatically. So the courts here need to know how your estate, what your wishes are with regard to the distribution. And also because English law says you can give your wealth to whoever you wish. So it's important to clarify what your wishes are.
Okay. Anyone else got any other questions? You're welcome to come online or use the chat box. There was a lot of questions beforehand, which I did write down. I think I covered most of them when I was talking to you. But let's see, there is someone has left a question. Okay, so obviously,
Said, if I can just say, as Muslims living in this country, we have two laws to respect.
yeah.
So we have double responsibility in everything that we do. We need to make sure that we are abiding by the English law as well, to make sure that our wills comply with the English law, as well as making sure, you know, our wishes with regard to the distribution of the estate happen as we have been instructed by the Quran and the Sunnah.
A couple of people have asked me, how do they contact you? So you want to share some contact details, please?
Yes, can I shout them over to you now?
You can shout them, or what you can do, there's a chat box. If you write them out in the chat box, then everyone will have them automatically, your details.
Okay, shall I do that
That
now?
may be easier.
Yeah. If I can just give me a minute and I'll just type that in.
No problem. And if anyone else wants to ask a question, you're welcome to use the chat box yourself to ask the question, or you can text me if you've got my details, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can leave it in the comments and I will go through them.
Right, I've put my details. It's Monday to Thursday, anytime between 10 to 6 p.m.
Okay, so you've got the details there. Okay, the question has come through. Okay, so this is a question. It says, if a Muslim couple have no children, what could happen?
If they have no children and they have wealth, you should write a will in all situations, whether you are single or you have no children. Islamically, your estate, whatever belongs to you, for example, a husband owns 50,000 and a wife owns 50,000. on death of the husband, the 50,000 will pass to his parents or his side of the family. And from the wife's share, when she passes away, it will pass over to her side of the family, i.e. her parents or her brothers and sisters. So again, if you don't have a will and you die with no children, it is quite possible that your estate could pass to the crown.
Okay.
So it's very important for everyone, even those people who have no family, for example. You want to make sure that because Islamically there is a route to distribute your shares. If you have no family, at least it will go to the treasury. So at least it will not pass to the crown.
Okay. Next question which I have for you is that what happens if I'm in a Muslim country? Do I therefore not need a will?
A Muslim country. I think to be always on the safe side, write your wishes, because you may have wealth in an Islamic country, but you may be working somewhere else outside of that country as well. So make sure you write a will and make clear your wishes. In an Islamic country, I know that in some of the Arab countries, automatically, whether you've got a will or not, your estate will be distributed Islamically. But it does cause a problem if you've got assets abroad. For example, someone working in Dubai, for example, somebody working temporarily in Dubai on a contract basis, but have assets and wealth here. It's important that you write a will. In any event, you can't go wrong if you've said in your will you want things done Islamically.
The next question I have is, I'm a divorcee and have a girl from a previous marriage. I'm now married again and I have another child. I bought a house which doesn't have a mortgage. Would the house also be split between my family? And if so, how would my wife have to give up the house for it to be divided?
Sorry,
how would the house be divided? He's got a marriage, he's got a child from a previous marriage as well.
His own child?
He's got an own child from previous marriage. He's remarried and he has now a child in this current marriage as well. So he wants to know how would the house be divided in that case, because he does have a child from the previous marriage as well.
Yeah, it's an extremely interesting question. The estate would be divided to his wife and to his biological children.
Both of them, yeah?
To both from the previous marriage, because they are his children, so they benefit.
And that would obviously be in the same division of 2 to 1, if it's a boy and a girl, yes?
Correct. But just remember, when the wife dies, her wealth will only go to her own biological child, but not to the husband's previous children. So that is why, again, another reason why you should write wills Islamically.
And for those, a couple of people have asked on YouTube for your number, so I'm going to say it out loud. So anyone who's got, if you can grab a pen and paper, and I will send it out. I'll put it on the YouTube as well. But Zubi's number is 07738 587802. That's 07738 587802. And Shahid has kindly said that your website is www.legactiesgroup.weebly.com. So that's www.legaciesgroup.weebly.com. Inshallah, I'll send that out to the people later on again, so that's not a problem. A question we have is, I have a son and a daughter, and the wife now is the breadwinner rather than the husband. Then would you still give less to the daughter where the daughter is the wife, an example of where the daughter is? I think what he's asking is that what happens, obviously, traditionally, a male has been the breadwinner, Now a female is the breadwinner. So he's asking, should therefore the will or more share go to the breadwinner, etc.?
There is no, because there could be there could be many reasons why a husband is not working. For example, they could be medically not well, and the wife has to earn be the main breadwinner. So it's not about who earns the money, it's what happens to your estate on death. So the husband would still benefit from his 1/4 share from her estate on death. But if she has parents who are alive, then they would be entitled to a share, and the remaining would pass to their children.
Okay. Next question. This question comes from a solicitor. Okay, so he's asked the question: if a wife dies, who gets the jewelry? And she died with no children. So does the jewelry go to the husband?
You see, any wealth that you own, whether it's cash or jewelry or cars, for example, or anything else, books, you may have valuable paintings, for example. With those kind of assets, the value of the estate has to be taken into account. So the jewelry must be valued as at the time of distributing the estate. Everything, every asset will need to be valued. And then you divide whoever is the benefit of those, of her estate or his estate for that matter. When it comes to the value of the estate, say the jewelry is worth 15,000 pounds, for example, then the executors can then give that, unless you've made specific list of wishes with who should get the jewelry. Again, that is something that you should express a wish who should get your jewelry in the event of your death. But it's the value that matters. And if, for example, the wife left parents or sisters, then it's better to give the jewelry and give it to the sisters or the females, and deduct that value from their share of the estate, if you see what I mean.
So let me just understand this. In this case that you in the case, let's assume that there is ample wealth, okay, and there is no children, but the wife does have sisters or even brothers. Would they then be entitled to some of that wealth?
Yes, of course, if whatever the wife owns,
Yeah.
it will go to her side of the family.
Okay.
If the parents are not there, it will go to her brother and her sisters. Okay. So the wealth will be distributed to the siblings.
So it will all, the wife's ownership goes Correct. To her family.
Correct.
That's right. Okay.
Correct. And same with the husband, his wealth will pass to his side of the family.
Family. Okay. Right. Next question is, if the husband dies, would his share be given to his family regardless of his wife being alive? Please explain both in case of having children and no children.
You see, when a husband dies, the wife has a right is entitled to a share from his wealth.
Yeah, okay.
And then if the parents are alive, then they would also be entitled to the share. If he has sons and daughters, then the remaining, after giving to the wife, it will pass to the sons and the daughters on the ratio of 2:1. If they have no children, then the wife still gets her 1/8 share, and the remaining passes to his brothers and sisters.
Okay. Right.
So it does not, they can give from the 1/3 if they wish to their in-laws if they prefer, but the estate gets distributed to their own respective families.
Okay. Question that I've now received is, according to Islamic world rules, distribution, can you decide to distribute evenly between son and daughter? I think we've covered this, that the actual ruling is specified that it is a 2:1 ratio.
This is how Allah has commanded. We have no discretion over who gets what. Allah Ta'ala has, in his own wisdom, he has said the males get double the share to that of the daughter, and we do not question that. We have to follow what Allah has commanded. However, if at the time of distribution, a male, a brother or a father voluntarily wish to give up part of their share to their daughters or to their sisters, then that's their choice.
That's a choice they make, but it's
That's
not.
a choice they make, but it is not something that you dictate in your will to say, I want everything evenly distributed, because that's not an Islamic distribution then.
Okay. You know the 1/3 that you can distribute, okay? You have a choice between distributing. You can take 1/3 of your wealth. You can put it to give. Can you use that 1/3 to give some members who would automatically inherit, give them more or not?
No, because Allah Ta'ala has said 1/3 is only for those who are not going to get a fixed share of your inheritance. Just to clarify, you don't have to use the 1/3 to gift. So
Yeah,
you
1/3
can
is
just leave
maximum, isn't it? Yeah, you can give that.
it's up to the maximum. Even if you give £5 out of the 1/3, that's your choice, but you don't have to give. So you cannot give to those fixed heirs anything from the 1/3, because that's dedicated, allowed only for those non-fixed shares. However, you see these shares of the fractions that get distributed only apply to what you leave on death. In your life, of course, you are free to help your daughters and sons and help them out. And if you wish to give them gifts, you are free to do that, as long as it's not an unfair and not preference of one over the other.
So I think that answers the question that one of the people asked about, can they give extra to the daughter? The answer is no, you can't. It can't be left in the will. But if you wish to do some in your lifetime, you can do so, as long as you treat all the children equally.
Correct.
Okay. I'm going. I think we've last chance for anyone who wants to ask a question. They can do so now. And before we leave now, there's one question which I ignored, and I'll ask your opinion. I'm not keen on using templates, okay? And someone had asked the question, is there a template they could use to do an Islamic will?
There are many templates around on the websites that you can use, but because it's a will that is relating to you and your particular set of circumstances and your family, your wealth situation, it's best to get advice, get it professionally done, and make sure that it's going to work for you for when the time comes. I have come across some template wills which have been done, for some people just before going to Hajj, have just printed out a template and done that, but it's not been worth the paper that they've written on. Unless if you can understand the terminology, you know what you're doing, I would say it's worth spending a little bit to get a professional and a will done that is correct, and you will have the peace of mind.
Absolutely, I agree with that. That's why I'm reluctant to use templates. Question that we have, a married couple, okay, so we're talking about husband and wife, can they do a joint will or do they need a separate will?
It's one will for each, because circumstances change. If they do a joint will, they get divorced, and they forget to write the will, it can create more problems, which is why it's best to do your own wills, because you may have your own ideas about who you want to appoint as the guardians for your children, who you want to give as sadqa jariyah. Each one has their own wish and will with regard to how the estate should be distributed.
Okay. There's a question about what charges are, etc. Charges obviously depends on your circumstances and what's involved. And we've left your contact details are there for everyone. I think anyone who wants to contact you with any personal questions or they wants to get a will done, So please do that privately, independently. I think because everyone will be, it will be depending on circumstances. I can tell you as an accountant that having a will is becoming more and more important because a lot of people are going to be caught up with inheritance tax. A lot of people don't realize that because of the estate values that we have now, a lot of people are falling within the regions of inheritance tax. So having a well thought out will can help you out that, but obviously it depends on your estates. Last question before we go today. What if the guardian of your children is different on the wife's will compared to the husband's will?
Um, it can happen because it depends on who is going to die first, because until this one of you is alive and you have minor children, it's parental responsibility for looking after the children. At the end of the day, you must and you should have people who are going to be the guardians of your children, who will really take up that responsibility and give them the bringing up and the welfare, look after their welfare and maintenance in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah. It's a big responsibility. It depends on who you are choosing. It should be by mutual consent so that you know your children will be looked after well after you're no longer there. And people do differ with regard to who should take care of your children, but just remember, you need to have two things in two main things that you should have in focus. It's their tarbiyah, who is going to, when you're no longer there, who is going to be giving them that the correct tarbiyah in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah. And they do their utmost financially, they are kept financially protected and cared for in the best of ways.
Jazakallah. I'm going to call it a day now. So once again, Jazakallah for your time and coming on and talking about this important topic, especially in the current climate. There are a lot of people who should be looking at doing wills. And inshallah, for those people who missed out on this, has been recorded and it will be available for you. Our local community hosted it on YouTube, so it will be on our local community YouTube, and I will send out the details. Once again, for those people who want to contact Sister Zubi, her number, if you've got a pen and paper ready, it is 07738587802. That's 07738587802. That's her contact details. She is available Monday to Thursday between the hours of 10 and 6 o'clock. If anyone missed that, please feel free to contact us and we will be more than happy to share the details out for you. So Jazakallah for once again for everyone being here. Jazakallah for our participant today, our guest speaker who talked about this important topic. I hope that everyone benefited from this and you will take seriously about writing a will. Okay, Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Said. Before everyone leaves, can I just say Jazakallah khair to you for hosting me and for everybody taking out this an hour of their Sunday morning to be on this, to attend this. But I would just like to leave them with one thought. Why do I need a will? It's because I care for myself and the consequences of the akhirah. I care and love my family who is going to be left behind.
Beautiful.
Why have I not done a will?
No, it's true, absolutely true, and I'm glad that they are the final thoughts today, and that should make people think about why they need a will and why I haven't. And having a will help. You know, everyone's got to pass away. I know some of us don't want to talk about death, but it is a reality. And having a will stop a lot of families falling out because my particular involvement with a few of people here has been that in the absence of a will and when estates and money is involved, the best of people have fallen out. So having a will help make sure that one, that you abide by the Islamic rulings on who gets what, and it will stop any bitterness between the family. So Jazakallah khair, Jazakallah for everyone being with us today. I'm going to call it Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.